Welcome to Tales of Fae and Folk, and in this second episode of the Fairy Artists, we are going to be taking a look at the work of one of my favourites. In this episode we are going to be taking a look at the strange worlds of Anster Fitzgerald, or Fairy Fitzgerald as he came to be known. Enjoy.
In the world of fairy art, there are so many images from history we are familiar of, from sweet flower fairies to darker images of elemental beings that can be almost nightmarish to the imagination. One of the most popular Victorian painters of fairy, and one who blended a stunning natural history art with otherworldly unnatural history, was the self-taught artist John Anster Fitzgerald, so associated with Victorian fairy art that his nickname became Fairy Fitzgerald. Born in Lambeth, London, with a rather fluid birth date officially, he was the son of poet William Thomas Fitzgerald, his Irish ancestry lending further fairy fascination to his life. Ireland and Éire, both countries of so much fairy folklore and legend. He married in 1849 and he and his wife Mary created a home with 4 sons and 2 daughters. His youngest daughter Florence, no doubt inspired by her father, also became an artist and sculptor. During Fitzgerald's lifetime as a professional artist, he exhibited at the Royal Academy of Arts in London in 1845, also at the British Institution, the Society of British Artists, and the Royal Watercolour Society. The popular newspaper, the world's first news magazine, the Illustrated London News, commissioned Fitzgerald to illustrate a collection of Christmas fairies, which appeared regularly in their festive edition. Often his original paintings would be renamed by galleries, as his own titles were a little bit vague, and so there has always been confusion and contradiction in the history of the paintings of Anster Fitzgerald. Of course, as a painter of these dual-natured elemental beings, his work gives not just a nod to the ethereally pretty worlds the good folk live in, but also many have a sinister atmosphere of darkness, beautiful nightmares both surreal and intoxicating, sometimes with a nod to the common use of drugs in the Victorian era, not just the casual use of laudanum and opiates, but also the opium dens of London so frequented by all classes of society. The fairy paintings of Fitzgerald are jewel-like, surreal, sometimes eerie, sometimes downright creepy, and yet always with an ethereal beauty. Strange Hieronymus Bosch-like shaped goblins and wicked-faced pixies cavort with pretty fairy females and males. Birds are held captive by these otherworldly creatures, small animals hunted or cared for, and the intoxicated dreams of sleeping human men and women haunted by the images of these peculiar beings. Sometimes the intense colours used, vivid reds, bright purples and violent blues, bring a shocking brightness to some of the paintings, colours picked straight from the summer flower garden, and yet other works have a subtle palette that almost drift mist-like over the canvas. The artworks can be both captivating and inspirational, and yet juxtaposed with a sinister atmosphere. These small beings are alive in our human landscape, peering through our windows, and yet we cannot see them ourselves in their reality. Although he rarely used literary inspiration for his work, one of the few rhymes he did use was that of "Who killed Cock Robin?" The great majority of his work, though, was from his own imagination and most probably inspired by his Irish ancestry and its acceptance of the world of the fairy folk. In 1902, Anster Fitzgerald exhibited his last painting at the Royal Academy, an image of Alice in Wonderland. He was a very private man, somewhat reclusive, certainly not comfortable mixing with other artists, usually found relaxing every Saturday at the Savage Club, a very popular gentlemen's club found in London, and yet he was known by friends to be a keen mimic of the popular actors of the day. In fact, he loved his time at the Savage Club so much he was known to have mentioned he wished he could die there. Sadly, though, he passed away only a few days before it would become his next Saturday visit to the club at the age of 87 in 1906. There is a very peculiar postscript to the story of the art of Anster Fitzgerald. In the late 20th century, a fascinating case came to light of a self-taught painter who had created forgeries of Anster Fitzgerald's art. Robert Thwaites, who specialised in Victorian-era forgeries, forged Fitzgerald's work as part of his wider crimes. One, The Miser, sold for £20,000. Another, Going to the Masked Ball, sold to a major London gallery owner and collector for over £100,000, although suspicion was already aroused regarding this particular painting. On the third attempt to sell a Fitzgerald forgery, Poppy with Imps and Fairies, the collector became suspicious, and both Thwaites and his brother were arrested and charged along with a friend who had aided and abetted in the crimes. In court, he claimed his failing eyesight had forced him to resort to a life of forgery to pay his debts and his son's school fees. On investigation, experts in Victorian-era painting noticed pigments were modern, and the brushstrokes were completely incorrect for the artwork of Fitzgerald. Although found guilty and sentenced, even the judge acknowledged Thwaites' talent as an artist. During the initial police search of Thwaites' home, during the investigation, a book was found. The title? The Art Forger's Handbook. So, until next time, dear friends, take care, brightest of blessings, and remember, don't play with the fairy folk, or you may end up in one of my folk tales or one of Mark's paintings yourself.